I'm Shannon Ireland, your host of a Healthy Push podcast. I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia for 15 years. Everything used to be hard for me. Even just driving 5 minutes from my house used to feel impossible. But now I absolutely live for travel and adventure, and I experience lots of peace and joy. I've not only reclaimed my life, but I've helped hundreds of others to do the same. Here, we stop managing anxiety and instead we create a healthy relationship with it. One where you say goodbye to the anxious thoughts, symptoms, panic attacks, and fears, and you actually live your life. Forget complicated strategies, quick fixes, or the same old hacks you've heard 100 times before. Each week, I'll bring you simple, actionable advice and honest conversations that lead to real, long-term healing. You aren't just an anxious person, my friend. There are reasons why you're struggling with anxiety, and these are things you can fix and heal from. And this is where that journey begins. Welcome. You're right where you're meant to be. Okay, today's conversation is going to be such a good one. I am really excited for this. It's been a topic I've been thinking about for so long. And I'm just so excited to have my guest here with me because I came across one of her reels and it deeply resonated. And I was like, dang, I got to have her on and talk about this. So I have Casey Molina here with me. She is a writer and a poet and also an integrative health coach. And yeah, she talks about so many different topics, but we're going to talk mostly about community and how to create community and this sort of isolation that I feel like a lot of us are feeling, but it's not really talked about and we don't really know how to navigate it. So we're going to talk about all the things, but first, welcome Casey to a Healthy Push podcast.
Thank you. Thank you, Shannon. I'm so excited to be here. And I'm just really excited that you considered me to have this conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So let's just start. Tell us a little bit about you. Who is Casey?
So, I work mostly as a digital content consultant, and I've been doing content for a while, primarily writing. I have a Substack. I think a lot of my work is centered around just like how I view society, the larger questions that I'm asking, and kind of opening up forums of conversations for people that want to engage. And then, of course, yeah, I do my health coaching stuff on the side, which I also really enjoy and super passionate about.
It's so cool. I love when I come across writers and poets online and just sharing like so many different thoughts, feelings that so many of us are having and not really expressing. And I think that's exactly why the one reel that like caused me to connect with you went so viral is because it is something that many of us are thinking and feeling, but I think we don't know how to express it. We don't even know sort of what to do with it. So this reel that I'm kind of alluding to and I keep talking about is that Casey was sharing thoughts on how having friend groups is like really different than creating community. Like community is such a different thing. And I think that's what so many of us are craving. Like I know I can be really honest and sort of blunt with this that I definitely have friend groups. Like I have, different friend groups, but do I necessarily feel like I have a community? Not really. So I'm really interested to just hear from you, like, what prompted you to create this reel? Like, what does all of that messaging mean to you?
Firstly, like when I moved to Barcelona, so I've been living in Barcelona now for 4 years. And that transition, I think of like growing up with a friend group and being around people that I had spent many years getting to know, and then moving to a completely different place. I had to go through many iterations of what a friend group looked like. And one of my biggest realizations, I think like the huge catalyst for me in terms of just this conversation was actually one of the first like big breakups that I went through a few years ago, and realizing that I didn't really have people around me who knew how to like meet me in that and hold space for me in that. And I felt like, oh, okay, I had all of these people that I felt were my friends. However, I'm going through this huge life shift and I'm just really not feeling that like communal support that I wanted. So I think for me, that's where this conversation started. And, Barcelona is a very transient city in the way that many people come and they leave. So you're always going, like, meeting new people and experiencing people leaving. So I think for many years have been craving something that feels like it's going to last and also is built on something more tangible than just, yeah, we go out and have like a really nice dinner once a week, or maybe we text every now and again, or we go to yoga together. So I think that's a huge part of it, and then I also think there's this, like, collective want, like you mentioned, of, like, we all just want community, and so many people are now talking about, "Oh, like, I wanna, buy land or raise families together and do all these things." So I think as I'm starting to enter more into that period of my life, it's really challenged me to think more intentionally of, like, what do I want that to look like, and are there people around me in my life now that I could see myself living more intentionally with. So I think that was the biggest thing where I was like, "Oh, yeah, is my friend group going to turn into my community?" And still figuring it out. I have some people where I'm
Yeah.
like, "Yes, absolutely," but yeah, still figuring out what that looks like.
Yeah, what you just said, living intentionally with, I think that's so beautiful, and I think this sparked for me when I had my daughter, and I felt like it was one of the hardest things that I've ever experienced becoming a mom. I mean, you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. It's so overwhelming, and I felt like I didn't have that support, that connection with people. I didn't have that community, and granted, yes, I have family, and I really remember sitting there thinking it would be so nice to have people that live next door that I could just go to and say, "Hey," like, just to be able to sit and talk. It would also be nice, right, to if you need something to say, "Hey, I need this. Do you have this?" Like, could we, swap things, or just I never ever thought that I would have these thoughts or feelings because I am very introverted. I am very, like, sort of keep to myself, but that when I had a child created this whole different sense of longing, like, I felt like I was really lacking something. So what is that, like, community? What's your idea of what that even looks like?
I mean, so much of like what you just spoke to, I think are questions that I have of, if I decide to have a child and become a mother someday and wanting to do it in community with other people so that I don't feel that lack of support. And what you said of wanting to be able to go to people, but also like have people reach out to you and go like, "Are you okay? You just had a baby. Like, how can I support you?" So that's yeah, like huge societal disconnect right there. But I think that this like craving that we're having feels obviously very ancestral. Like we're kind of going through this moment where we're like going backwards. We're like, I'm really missing this thing that feels inherent to just like being human. But, and I talked about this a bit in the video of I think it's by design that we don't know how to build these communities. And so for me, like moving from the US to Spain, culturally it's very Western culture still, but I also realize like how individualistic like US American culture is and feels in the context of living in another country. And so I've, been so lucky to, I think, experience people here in Barcelona the last couple of years who are building community so beautifully in ways that seem so small, but I'm like, "Oh, like, this is what we're doing together." So, I have friends here who host, like, supper clubs and raise money for charities and organizations, and people who will, like, have a house party, but they're, like, hosting so that they can raise money to funnel it into a community center so that people can come and do art and music and host music festivals. So, I think I've gotten so many, like, good ideas from them on what that feels like, but then also just like the general idea of, yeah, how do we come together on a normal basis? How do we spark these kinds of conversations? And what does it look like for us to be intentional? And I think that word's maybe going to come up a lot today, but I realized it really like we had a blackout in Spain a couple months ago. And so there was like no power for the whole day. It was like over 12 hours. And that was the first time that I had ever thought to myself, who are the people that I would even think about going to find if something like this happens? And so we couldn't talk to our friends all day. And then at the end of the day, when the power finally came back and people were like in the group chats, like, "Are you okay?" That was the first time we'd ever had conversations of what's our contingency plan? Like, how do we know where to find each other? How do we know where to meet up? How do we know how to get in contact? So, I know that kind of
Mhm.
takes it in a more apocalyptic direction, but it's a huge part of the conversation in terms of when you need big things and small things. Like, who do you go to? So, yeah, I think in terms of what that looks like for me, I do have friends that I know I can go to on a regular basis. But this is also, I think, the disconnect that a lot of us feel. Something else I mentioned in that video was like, your friends don't necessarily have to be your community. And that was, like, overwhelmingly the commentary on that video where people were like, "I have communities, but they're not my friend group." And I think that's important to create that distinction if it exists, because there are also spaces that you can go into and identify and have shared values and have that interdependence, and maybe those aren't your friends. So I'm pivoting a bit more into that as I'm exploring this, because I do think I have people that I would consider part of my community and people who I know who would show up for me consistently. But again, this idea of like, who's checking in on you and who are you checking in on, and who is like strategically working together for the collective benefit of everyone, it's not always your friends. So
Yeah, that's so true. It's so interesting, of course, because the community that I serve and work with are struggling with anxiety and panic disorder and agoraphobia. And that, of course, I think as a collective, many of us are struggling with anxiety as a whole. And it's so incredibly challenging. And I think that's one of the biggest things that is sort of causing us to feel so much more lack and desire for connection is that so many more of us are struggling and really feeling like I don't have this community that I could go to and say, "Hey, I'm really struggling." Or like you said, people who would reach out and say, "Are you okay?" Even with the big stuff, it's like I think of when I had a child and I didn't really have that people reaching out and saying, "Hey, how are you doing? Are you okay?" It's sort of just like, "Oh, you just had a kid." Like that's people do that every day. And it's like this is a major life transition, but I think just in the day to day, right? Like having a community that is going to be there that you can have some reliancy on and you can have asks and have this expectation that like they're going to check in, they're going to make sure that you're okay. And that's so hard, right? When you feel you're struggling already and then there's so much isolation on top of that. I think this is another thing that you speak on, and I think is an important part of the conversation is this loneliness sort of that a lot of us are feeling and this isolation. And I really feel like this is an epidemic. Like so many of us are walking around feeling lonely.
absolutely.
And I'm just wondering, like, why do you think this is that so many of us are walking around feeling so disconnected when, like you said, not in a blackout, we are able to connect like that, right? Instantly. We're able to message and we're able to get a hold of people. We know where exactly where people are, but so many of us are walking around feeling so lonely. Like, why is that?
Wow. I mean, I love this question because I was reading a lot of the comments on those videos that I posted on both TikTok and Instagram. And people kept saying this, like, overwhelmingly, this phrase, "community is inconvenience." And I think one of the reasons why we are so lonely is because we're so used to, like, immediate gratification and convenience. And so even what you described of, like, you've had a baby and everyone thinks, like, "Oh, this is an everyday occurrence," they might be thinking they don't wanna inconvenience you by, reaching out with messages, and you might be thinking you don't wanna inconvenience them by asking for help. And it's kind of like we're very disconnected from this idea of like, it's okay for me to inconvenience the people around me and for the people around me to inconvenience me.
Yeah.
And that I think is that vulnerability aspect that you mentioned earlier, that it's like, it takes a lot of vulnerability to say, hey, I need this and I need this consistently and on a normal basis. So I feel like a lot of people don't want to do that. And and I'm guilty of this too. I think it shows up in my life in really like silly small ways where I don't like going to the grocery store. I need to have my groceries ordered to my house. However, in the times where I'm finally able to like leave my house and walk around my neighborhood, I'm like passing people that I see all the time and saying, "Hey, and how are you?" And I'm like, oh, like I am depriving myself of interaction on a daily basis and connections that could lead to potential community and people knowing me. Because I will say, like, one thing during that blackout as well, where I was able to walk into like the supermarket and the guy that I always go into and just be like, hey, what's going on? And, he knew me. So he sat with me for a moment and was like, I don't know. And, we just kind of had a conversation. And these are the things that you feel comfortable doing when you have that familiarity and that exposure to people, but you have to inconvenience yourself to do that and to have that. So, yeah, I think that's one small part of it, but also what you said about social media. Social media has added this level of convenience of we can get anything, including human interaction when we need it, and then just shut it off when we don't. And that makes us feel very like not versed in what it looks like to have to communicate with people when we don't feel like it, and have to show up for our friends when we don't feel like it, and have to be social when we don't feel like it. So, yeah, I think that's a huge unlearning. It's a bad habit that we've been in for a while now, and it's a huge unlearning we need to undertake.
Yeah, so what you were just saying is, like, kind of blowing my mind right now because I think so many of us do see connection as inconvenience. Like, inconvenient in the sense of it pushes us to have to do things that take more effort, take more time, but also mentally and emotionally, it takes more effort. And I think yeah, it's not that we don't have the skills, I think. I think it's that we don't really use them, we don't practice them, and so it feels incredibly foreign to be vulnerable and to, like, make the efforts, and I totally like, just when you were telling the grocery store story, like, it's so funny because I've never gotten groceries delivered, like, I'm just that person that, like, wants to pick my groceries, but I can see it, right? That's such a convenient thing to do. But it is so interesting that when I go to the grocery store, sometimes I do see some of the same people, but sometimes they have these really small, what might seem like not so meaningful interactions actually bring me so much joy. Like when people just say hi or say, oh, hey, like the other day I was in the grocery store and my daughter was having a moment, and this older gentleman came to me and just shared a couple of words. And he was like, do you want like these to, take these for your daughter? And it was so cute. And I was just like, oh my God, that made me so happy. But yeah, I think we are depriving ourselves, but there's also that disconnect there of like, "Ooh, so what do I do?" Because it feels so big. It feels so like it does feel really foreign for so many of us, especially with the more layers that get added, right? Like you can just have groceries delivered. You don't really need to go anywhere. You don't need to see people.
You don't need to leave your house if you don't want to nowadays.
Right, right. It's so true. But I think before we kind of pivot, because I want to talk about like maybe what does this even look like? Like, how do we do the unlearning and what is the unlearning? I think another layer that you talk about that really adds to this is in our culture, we definitely prioritize the romantic relationships
Yeah.
because, like you were just saying, you kind of alluded a little bit to it, but I'm also thinking, right, when you are in any sort of hardship or like emergency, anything, your immediate thought is like, okay, where is my partner and how would I reach them? And maybe they're always the first person sort of on the list. I think we sort of see this person or maybe persons as the ultimate support. Like this is kind of the only support. And that is so limiting, right? And so
Yeah.
harmful. So,
Yeah.
can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's definitely a part of this too.
I think nail on the head what you just said, because in that same instance where we had the blackout in Spain, I with my boyfriend at the time, the only person I was thinking of, like, where is he? And how is he gonna know how to connect with me? And how are we gonna get together? And, once I had finally found him, and then it was kinda like my vision widened a bit to go like, "Oh, yeah, my friends, like, are they okay?" And that made me so sad because a lot of those friends I have known longer than him. And so I was like, that is really a shame that, yeah, immediately my mind goes to like this one other person and not like all of these other people that, could reciprocally support me through a situation like this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, In terms of this as like a larger conversation, yeah, of just how like society prioritizes romantic connection, because we're also failing in that way. That's a whole other conversation.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I remember, like, going through a breakup a couple years ago. It was the same experience I had, I'm just realizing a lot of people who didn't show up for me and weren't there for me, but then I also had to really look at myself in the mirror and ask myself the hard question of, like, how good of a job did you do of cultivating those friendships when you were in your relationship?
Yeah.
And that was super humbling because I was like, "Yeah, neither of us were really reaching out, neither of us were really, like, continuing to build the friendship during that period of my life." So I was like, if I'm being honest with myself, it shouldn't be this like grand shock of, those people not being there for me in that way. I also wasn't there for them during that time. And I had a friend say this to me, like, I think just the way she put it really clicked for me in my mind, where she was like, your relationship should always just be a part of that big ecosystem that you have going for you. It's just like one spoke in the wheel. And for me, like at that time, that was like mind blowing because I was like, yeah, I have always been taught to be looking for, a romantic partner and then everything's going to be okay once I have that. And I think, as I'm nearing like late 20s, entering 30s, I'm really thinking of, oh, like who are the people who have always been around me? And it really is like my female friends and like having those friendships that can support me in multiple ways in my life. And, romantic partnerships are great, but I'm like, I also feel so nourished by those friendship connections. And so I think sometimes we do need to just think about what does it look like for us to show up for those both in and out of relationships. And again, I'm going to use the word intentionally because it's important.
Yeah, yeah. I It's so funny because I don't know if you've ever listened, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, she has her own podcast
Okay.
where she interviews women who are wiser than her. It's probably called Wiser Than Me, actually, now that I'm thinking of it.
Okay.
But
Okay.
these are women who are like in their 70s, 80s, 90s. And something that you consistently hear is advice that they would give is to prioritize those friendships, those women or those men, right, who are always who have been there for you and who will consistently be there for you. And that really creates this sense of community. And like the more you pour into it, the more you're going to get out of that. And you really can have this reliancy and it goes both ways. And these conversations, they're so cute. They always get me thinking, but it's so true. It's like we put so much emphasis on our partner and we pour so much into that. And I think of when I'm really going through hard stuff or through even happy stuff, through transitions, my friends, right? The people who have been in my life for so long, those are the people that I'm often reaching out to, but not so much in my day to day. Like it's not like we're really having check-ins or like, yeah, like you said, maybe it's going to dinner or having a drink, but it's like, my gosh, there's so much missed, opportunity there.
Yeah.
There's so many conversations in this one conversation that I'm like,
Yeah, it's
"Where
so
do
true.
we take this?" Yeah, because it's like
Yeah.
the romantic relationship part is a whole conversation in and of itself.
Oh
The
my God.
the
Yeah.
loneliness and the disconnect, and especially you add social media on top of that, like, that's a whole disconnect in of itself, but I feel like I do wanna talk about this one piece relating to social media because it is very much a part of the society, the culture that we live in, and it's not going anywhere. So it's like, how do we maybe have a different, better relationship with it? Because I think so much of what you hear when people say, create a community, right? Get into a community, do this, do that. And it's often like get into a support group and an online support group, like get into a Facebook group or whatever it is, and I kind of always cringe because I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, is that" I
Yeah.
can see those oftentimes as being very harmful. So it's like, in your opinion, what do you think? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Like, do you think those online communities can offer real connection, or do they lack something that's, like, really essential?
Well, and I do have to just say because I offer, like, as a health coach, I do offer like online group coaching. So this is something that I think about and where I won't say it's like the end all be all of this is the community that you're seeking and that you need because yeah, I think we enter these spaces and then find them feeling so empty in a way still. But I think they can be great gateways into the kinds of connections that maybe you're looking to build. And it's always really beautiful if like people connect in those spaces and then they're like, "Oh, well you're in my coaching group, but actually we live not too far from one another. Let's meet up because you shared something that I really resonated with." So you never know how that's going to happen, and I think in that way, social media has really, like, catalyzed those, like, global connections for us, but we have to remember to take it off of social media. I think that's the missing piece of, like, if you meet someone that you connect with, like, great, we live in a globalized world. You can go visit that person. You can go meet up with that person, grab a coffee, and experience them in real life. And that yeah, that goes back to the convenience thing. Not everybody wants to do that, but yeah, I think the online communities are a great first step to maybe the communities that we're wanting, but not the end all be all.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I obviously run groups too, and I see so much benefit in it. Like, it is absolutely beautiful, the stuff that can come out of groups, and it is more intimate, and you're sharing a lot of vulnerability, and you have a lot of, like, the same things that you're going through, and so there's that I'm heard, I'm seen, like, there's validation, there's so much goodness that comes from that. But yeah, I think it is that next step is this inconvenience part of like, how do I be a little bit more vulnerable? How do I, reach out and really make that effort and build more of this sense of community? I'm curious when let's go back a little bit to delve into this, but like when you said we have unlearning to do,
Yeah.
what did you mean by that? I'm curious.
I mean, I think this goes back to, like, individualism. We've really been it's been hammered home for us of, like, it's about me, and it's about what I need to do, and it's about all of the things that I need to get done in a day. And so I think part of that unlearning is thinking about outside of ourselves, like, "Is everybody in my ecosystem okay? How can I check on those people
Mhm.
today?" So, the other thing that I wanna add to this is I think in this conversation of community, we're all really quick to be like, I need a community because, think of all the things that it could offer me. But we don't often think like, what do I have to offer to the community? So
Yes.
I think that is part of the unlearning of it's not just about what you stand to gain, but what you stand to give. And so people really thinking like, oh, what is my like unique skill set as a friend or as a pillar of the community? And how can I show up consistently and remind people that I'm there to support them? Whether that's like, knowing that your friend really doesn't like cooking for themselves and you always make too much food and you just invite them over once a week and you just say, "Hey, like, why don't you come over and let's share a meal?" Or knowing that you love giving advice to your friends and saying, "Hey, like, let's just meet up and go for a walk and just tell me what's on your mind today." Like knowing what your friends value you for or what your community values you for and reminding them that you're there to provide that.
Oh, I love that. I think we so often lose sight of that, right? Like, what do I have to offer? Because we all have so much to give. And I'm sure you see this too in your community that this is one of the most beautiful things when I see people supporting others and really giving their like gifts. And you're just like, dang, that's so powerful. Like, that's so good. And I think we don't stop to think like, what do I actually have to offer?
Right.
Because it's not always, like you said, it's not always about what you're getting.
Right.
It's reciprocal, or it should be. And that's how I think you get more of that sense of community. It's not just what can I get from this, but what can I give to this and have that sort of like exchange. I think that really helps to create that sense of community.
Yeah.
People are probably like, "Okay, this is great." But, like, what what does this actually look like in practice? I know a lot of people that I work with, and myself included, like, feel isolated and do feel that disconnect, and they're already struggling, so it is probably hard, right? The hardness of this is it takes effort, it takes intentionality, and it is often inconvenient. Like, it's just hard too. So, like, I love small steps. Is there, like, a small step, something that people can do to really start to cultivate community. And maybe it's not because where my brain's going right now, right, is I always remind people it's not always like action in the tangible way that you think. Like maybe it's just by starting to think about like what do I actually have to offer.
Mhm.
So I don't know what your thoughts are. Like what can people do if they're like, I want this? I just have no clue.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such an important question, one that I'm still thinking on. But what I have realized, and I think it's great, like I get to be a lifelong learner from these kinds of conversations and the traction of this conversation that got sparked from that video, because I've also thought this to myself. And I do think that the first step is really asking, what do you have to offer? But then I think the second step is being very vulnerable with the people in your life and going like, hey, I really want this community and I want it to feel like it has a soul. What does it look like for us to put something together that has, similar values, or like what are we rallying around that feels good and feels substantial? And I had someone reach out to me. Her name is Kat Lampingua. She sent me a copy of her book called Build It and They Will Come. And it's kind of this like guide on architecting community. So I've been reading her book and it's so insightful so far. And it talks about how she started something called like Goddess Council, just from literally like inviting people over to her house to share meals and just conversation, and coming from that, like, pain point of, I feel really lonely, and I just wanna invite people into my space and be intentional with what I want this space to feel like and what it's about and how I want people to gather together. So I think having all of those conversations and all of those, like, thoughts, asking them back to yourself of what do I want my own community to feel like? And then, yeah, really just do it. And it doesn't have to be this, like, grandiose, like you said, like, we like small steps. I also love a small step. It can be something as simple as, I know all my friends love to read books, and I'm going to just invite them over for one night a month, and we're going to talk about books. But maybe that conversation goes one step further into, like our finances. And then I find out that all these women have a pain point surrounding money. And this is something that I did recently where I just told my friends, like, hey, I'm really like thinking about money this month and I want to do like a little ritual where we like sit down on the beach and we journal and we talk about money. And it ended up just being like two of my friends that I invited, but it ended up being eight women that had come because a friend of a friend had come and they invited somebody else. And then suddenly it's like, a group of women on the beach talking about their pain points surrounding money, but really like branching into a larger community of women who ended up going like, "What else do you do? And I wanna go to your yoga classes, and I wanna do this with you, and I wanna see this person again because they're really cool." So I think we can't discount those small steps and how they cast out these threads that we don't quite see what they'll grow into, but, like, literally that small step is what starts that snowball. So I think, yeah, again, just not making it too complicated, just doing it.
I know our brains love to make everything so complicated and like, how am I going to create this community? And I want it to feel like this and I want it to look like this. And then we don't even start anywhere because we're like, how am I going to get from here where I'm feeling so lonely, isolated and disconnected to feeling all the things that I want to feel?
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's part of it too, right? It's like, how do you want to feel? Like, what are you actually looking for? And I think, like you said, a part of this, right, is finding people who have those similarities, have those, same values, have things that you like, enjoy, or need, like have needs surrounding. Like, what are the things that we have in common? It's so funny because I'm going to use myself because this is just like, I want people to realize, right, like, this is so human. I have been wanting this for so long, and one of my friends, she's a photographer and she's so extroverted, and she started these, like, social networking walks, and it's like, I love walking. I love being in nature. Like, I want more community. I want to meet more women. Have I been to one? No. Inconvenient, right? Like, I actually have to take time out of my day
Yeah.
to drive there to and it's this I know it's gonna be mental effort, and but it's like, it's so funny that we do that, that we're like, "This is so important and I want this," but yet I'm not taking those
Right,
actions to
right.
support them.
Yeah, we kinda have to laugh at ourselves. We're like, "I'm so silly because I'm not doing the thing that I'm saying I want to do." But then I also feel like we need to be aware of how strategic that is and like why we're so exhausted. And, this is a larger conversation about the way society functions and the way that we work. So, yeah, it's by design. And I think once you just exercise a little bit of that compassion towards yourself, of like, I am tired today, and it's also been designed for me to feel this way. And therefore, I'm going to push just that little extra step to get myself to this place because I know that it's going to support me in a new way. But it is hard, and it's easier said than done. So
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm glad you mentioned that self-compassion because that's always a piece of this, especially when you're pushing, like, it is, probably outside of your comfort zone. It probably doesn't feel familiar. It feels a little bit like, uh, ick. I know it can feel that way for me, but I love what you said of, like, sharing similar pain points. I think so many of us are have a shared experience of the hard stuff that we're going through. Like we're sort of all experiencing a lot of hard and a lot of it is shared hard, but we're not really talking about it and how it's affecting us. And just like you gave the example of money, right? It's like there's so many different things that it could be. And I'm sure if you talk about something, chances are somebody, right, in a friend group of yours is going to say, hey, like, gosh, I'm really like wanting to explore that, or I'm really struggling with that. And that just like is a place, right, where you can
right,
open it up
right.
and actually start somewhere. Okay, if somebody is resonating with this, like I would love for them obviously to go find you and explore the work that you do. And I think like you're saying and being very honest about this is still something that you're exploring and figuring out. So can you maybe share just where you're at with it? Like what have you learned since the video and like what are maybe some steps that you're taking to create more community for yourself?
Before that video, before I even recorded it, I was having this conversation with anyone and everyone and just kind of gauging like who's serious. Cause I'm like, hey, I want to build a community of people because we're all feeling super lonely. And what does it look like for us? And really just asking my friends, so are we staying in Spain together? Are we going to move somewhere else together? And hey, what if we like pooled our money together and bought land together? And like, when are you having kids? Because maybe we'll have kids around the same time. And really from those conversations, like I said, seeing who's like serious and who's really like, oh, you know what? Like this is something that I'm truly feeling and what are our solutions for it? So I think that's a conversation I was having before. Since the video, I have been thinking about ways that I can more intentionally lean into my local community. And I do have like a funny story that back in May, I was like, I'm going to go find community in Colombia. So I took a trip to Colombia and I went to go teach yoga, and it really did not pan out the way that I wanted it to. So I ended up coming back early and I was kind of like feeling really down, thinking this was a failed opportunity for me. I wanted to go, I wanted to live in this eco village, I wanted to meet people. And I did connect with so many people in just the short time that I was there. But the overwhelming feeling I had when I came back was like everything that I left to go have, I have in my neighborhood. And I was like, yeah, I wanted to, go learn how to grow my own food. I literally have like horticulture workshops around the corner for me and a community garden that I always say I'm going to go to. But again, you just never make the time to go to it. And I wasn't going enough. And, this like way of living where I was like, my friends are always inviting me over and I'm telling them, oh, I'm busy or oh, I have to work. So I think it's really helped me reframe like how I can look at what I've already created for myself and lean into that and make it easier for
Yeah.
me, because I think also I'm someone in my mind where I'm like, "I want the community to look like this, and therefore I have to go out and do this really complicated thing to build it." But sometimes it really is just a matter of going like, "What community already exists around me, and how can
Mhm.
I, engage with that on a regular basis?" So I think, yeah, for me, in terms of that and just like my own personal goals that I have, I do really wanna learn how to grow my own food, so I'm like, gonna go to that community garden, gonna go to those horticulture workshops, gonna spend more time with my friends who are hosting these supper clubs in the city, and just, yeah, like having that togetherness with people, allowing myself to find the time in what I always say is my busy schedule, but to do that with
Yeah.
people.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And maybe that is just the first step for people is figuring out like what would I even want? Like what are my interests? What are my values? Like what am I looking for? Right. And really
Yeah.
maybe journal on that because yeah, it's so hard to even take a step when you're like, "I don't even really know what I'm looking for." Like, I just know I feel lonely and isolated, and I
Yeah.
don't like this feeling, but what is it actually that you're looking for? And I think, yeah, it's also this, the more I feel like the older you get, you do really, like, understand how important family is, and I'm very grateful that I have family, but my family is also incredibly small, and you can't rely on them, right,
Yeah.
for everything, and it's so important to build outside of that and those romantic relationships, like, oh, now I just am like, "Shannon, you got some homework. You get some homework to do," which is good.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I just love the work that you're doing and the things that you share, and so if people
Thank
wanna
you.
find and connect with you, Casey, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me on Instagram. So my Instagram is my name, Casey Molina, but with 3 A's. You can find me on TikTok at Casey's Healing. You can find me on my other Instagram at Casey's Healing, where I do exclusively my integrative nutrition coaching. But yeah, this has been such a pleasure. And yeah, thank you so much.
I hope you loved this episode of A Healthy Push. If you have, I'd be so grateful if you could leave me a rating and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. This helps people to find the show and get the support they need. And if you know someone who could use a little push, be sure to share this episode with them. And for even more support, head over to ahealthypush.com for show notes and loads of tips, tools, and inspiration to help you on your recovery journey. I'll see you next week.